The first opportunity I would say is about cities as laboratories of experimentation.
Are you interested in the dimensions of urban futures? What do you think about urban experimentation? How can we create the future of cities as it depends upon our imagination? Stay tuned for answers from Arman Mirzakhani.
What is the future for cities? Do you want to learn more about them? Do you want to know how others think about them? Do you want to be part of the conversation? Then this is the right place.
Welcome to What is the Future for Cities podcast. Today, I will interview Arman Mirzakhani, architect, urban designer, and researcher. We will talk about his vision for the future of cities, dimensions of cities, rethinking infrastructure, defining the future by our imagination, and many more. So let's start with a proper introduction. Arman Mirzakhani is an architect, urban designer, and researcher focused on creating innovative, livable urban environments. With expertise in urban planning, big data analytics, machine learning, GIS, and transdisciplinary research, he drives smart city and sustainable urban development through data-driven insights and emerging technologies. A strategic thinker and adept problem solver, Arman manages complex projects and collaborates with government, academia, and international organizations. His strong communication skills and solution-oriented mindset ensure impactful outcomes in fast-paced settings. Passionate about advancing urban solutions, Arman is eager to contribute to transformative projects that enhance urban sustainability. And with that, Arman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for your time. I highly appreciate your appearance on the podcast. And let's jump right in. What does the future of cities mean to you?
Thanks for having me today. It's a great pleasure to talk about the concept and phenomena, which is really important in these days and needs deep consideration to talk about future of cities, which is really important. Today, we're going to talk about something that has always been changing under our feet. We're talking about cities, not just the buildings or the apps, but the way we decide to live together. So the future of cities, to me, is the future of how we organize life. This is important to know. How we share the resources, how we build trust, actually, how we make room for difference. So today we will go through the ideas, the real examples from around the world, from Copenhagen, Medellin, Lagos, Singapore, and those the others like Barcelona and so on and so forth. We are not just looking at skylines. We are looking at the relationships. We need to see the cities of future from different dimensions. If I want to talk about cities, I could see cities as mirrors. They show us who we want to be. When people built the first great cities, they were building places to pray, govern, and imagine. Today's global hubs, from New York to Tokyo, to Barcelona, to Lagos, too many cities are still places of enormous possibility. Different people meet, ideas collide, and new things are made. So it's important to see different dimensions of future cities. In contrast, the mirrors, when we're talking about the mirrors, also reveal cracks. That's important to know. Luxury towers can hide deep inequality. Rapid growth can mean informal settlements, expanded faster than services we do in the cities. Think of Lagos as an example that I want to talk about. Breathless, explosive of city commerce and creativity, but also a city where millions live in informal neighborhoods. I would say without reliable water, let's say, or sanitation. Or another case, when we see it, New York City as a large city where cultural dynamism sits beside a stubborn housing crisis. These are not just problems. They are choices we've made, sometimes by accident, sometimes by design. So cities show us both our best selves and our blind spots. But how do we fix this frame? This is what we need to think about the future of cities, how we can handle it. So from different dimensions, we need to see it. The first dimension that I want to talk is about the philosophical dimension. The question which rises in this concept is that how should we live together? This is a big question. How should we live together? Cities are not only bricks and wires. They are the agreements about how we share space and resources. The ways we answer this question, or the way we think about it, create law, policy, daily practice, so on and forth. So if a city is designed only for profits, It will favor those who already have privilege. In many cities around the world, we can see this. If it's designed for a common life, it builds schools, transit, park, plazas, so on and so forth. Barcelona's recent debate, where the city where I'm in, where I studied, where I get my PhD, where I talk to many people, debates about tourism, housing, citizens organized as they wanted their neighborhoods back from speculation. Too many tourism in Barcelona. And when you walk in the streets, you can see too many people from all over the world. And it is not so comfortable for the people who reside there, you're forcing the people to live there. That's a philosophical question becoming political. It's not abstract. It shows up in zoning meetings and housing policy and who's allowed to stay in a neighborhood. The philosophical choices we make about cities become law. It's important. The next dimension of our talk is about the ecological question. Can cities live with the planet? It's a really important question. Cities are both a cause and a solution for ecological crisis. They concentrate emissions, energy use, and waste. But they also concentrate talent, infrastructure, and potential efficiency. The future of cities depends on whether they can reduce their footprint and increase resilience. Copenhagen, which has been invested in cycling and public design that nudges people away from cars. Or in Brazil, Curitiba became famous for its bus rapid transit system and large public parks now that manage both recreation and floating. Or Singapore has made a greenery a design principle. Vertical gardens and water recycling are part of the city's identity. Jakarta, when I was struggling with subsidence and sea level threat, a reminder that choices we make today can turn into urgent migration problems tomorrow. A city that ignores the planet won't last. This is the second dimension that I wanted to talk about, the future of cities. The third one is about the social contract, about housing, care, and inclusion. Cities are also about how we take care of one another. Housing policy, healthcare, transit, these are the grammar of everyday life. And if those systems are stable or fair, people can build lives. If not, trust the phrase and cities become fragmented. This is really important when we're talking about social contract. Vienna shows what the long-term investment in public housing can do. Livable makes neighborhoods and less displacement. Or in Medellin in Colombia was a remarkable example to turn around the story. Cable cars. I'm going to talk about cable cars or public libraries that were part of a broader investment in inclusion that helped reduce the violence, which they're dealing with this kind of violence every day. Cities in Colombia like Medellin. Contrast with, let's say, another example, San Francisco, for example, where booming wealth has coexisted with skyrocketing rents and a growing house population, for example, in San Francisco. A reminder that prosperity alone doesn't solve distribution. Good policy is what keeps cities human. It's about the social contract. The other dimensions is about economic vitality and innovation. Who benefits? This is a real question for the future of cities. Who benefits the economy and innovation? We all agree that the cities are engines of growth. Dense networks of people create jobs, businesses, culture. But economic dynamism must be matched by policies that distribute the opportunities everywhere in cities. Technology can concentrate wealth as often as it is spread. It's really important. Shenzhen, China, changed from a small fishing town to a tech center, shows what rapid urban economic policy can do. But the question still remains. This example still raises questions about the labor conditions. Or another example, if we want to talk about Bangalore tech boom, which has made India globally competitive. Yet the city also fights still with congestion and basic service pressure. Or in Detroit, in USA, which shows the long tail of the industrialization and the role of local grassroots revival. Economic success is not just growth, it's distributed opportunity. So we need to think about it for the future of cities. Next dimension of belonging and identity. The question is, who feels at home? A city that fosters belonging is a city where people feel seen. This is more than legal rights. It's culture, it's festivals, public spaces, everyday rituals. Belonging reduces loneliness and builds civic energy. Who feels at home? To give you an example about Toronto, let's say, is often praised for its multi-ethos, visible in different neighborhoods and festivals. Or in Berlin, which invested in memorials, culture, and both remember and welcome. Yes, it also battles gentrification, a critical and important phenomenon which often is seen in different cities that pushes long-time residents out, something that's happened to Barcelona too. Or in Cape Town, let's see another example, reveals persistent special scares of apartheid. Physical distance still maps to inequality, and belonging is uneven. Belonging is the invisible infrastructure of a healthy city, which we need to think about it. Let's talk about technology and human flourishing. Everywhere we can hear about the smart city a lot. Sensors, data, artificial intelligence. Okay, these can make services efficient, but technology also raises deep questions. Privacy, control, bias. The measure of success isn't the number of sensors. It is whether the tech supports human dignity or not. This is a really important question. We all know about the sensors. We know all about the efficiency. I would give you a real-world example. Songdo, South Korea, a city which has been built from scratch, a purpose-built smart city. When you go to the city, you cannot find any people walking around. You can just see too many sensors everywhere, many cameras. Great, it's efficient, but it can feel unproductive. Or in Tallinn, Estonia, is an example of digital governance done with transparency, with e-residency, digital IDs, and a public-first approach to data. Tech should be a tool, not the boss. This is something that you could see in cities like Masdar in Dubai, or in South Korea, or in new smart cities from scratch. So maybe we just need to reinforce cities to be smart, not to build them from scratch. The next part is about resilience and adaptation, weathering shocks. Cities will be tested by pandemics, storms, economic shocks. Resilience is the ability, actually, to respond with social networks, public health, responsive governance. When it was pandemic, it was in Milan for a short time, and then came back to Barcelona. It's a personal experience that I see myself. Milan's pandemic response actually included rapid reallocation of street space to people. A small change with big public health benefits. Or in Rotterdam, in Netherlands, designed for water plazas that became storage in heavy rains and public gathering spots. We have also another examples in this case. In New Orleans, reminds us that infrastructure alone isn't enough. Trust and inclusive rebuilding matter after disaster. Resilient cities plan for storms and for people, not just think about the storms or a disaster, but for the people. So we need to merge them. We need to integrate them. When we want to imagine the future, we need to talk about the role of culture and participation. Imagination is the engine of change. It's sometimes overlooked. Grassroots projects, artists rethinking public spaces. These practices show that citizens can co-create a future. The critics, let's say, the cities we want, let's say like this, will come from experiments, failures, and community courage. We need to integrate all of them together. The experiments, failures, courage, and community participation. In Mexico City, as an example, has used budgeting to let residents to set priorities and neighborhood levels, like many other cities, like in Amsterdam and so forth. Imagination scales when it meets organizations. The future of cities is not a single future. Which one we get depends on choices we make now, in policy, in design, in technology, and how we care for one another. Cities are mirrors of us, and we are holding them. So if we want cities that are fair, green, and full of belonging, we must act like citizens, not passive consumers.
Thank you very much for giving this detailed expression, because with your description of the dimensions, and I counted 8, please correct me if I'm wrong: philosophical, ecological, social, economic viability, belonging and identity, technology and human flourishing, resilience, adaptation, and engagement, experiments, and culture. And you also mentioned that the future will depend on our choices. I would be curious in your understanding, because you mentioned many different cities, whether there would be one good future towards which our choices could lead, or whether each city would have their own good future towards their own choices could lead.
What we need to think about, and we should be aware and we should be clear about it, is about context. When we're talking about cities, we need to think about the context. It's not possible to give one template for every city everywhere in global South or in America or in South America. It's not possible. When we're talking about designing cities, when we're talking about the policy making, when we're talking about decision making, it's important to see the context. The people who live there. We cannot see on our tables and then design for a city which we have never seen the people, which we have never talked with people, which we've never seen the context, the relations. So it's not possible. When you're talking about the future of cities, it's important to know the real needs of people, to think about the real relations among the people, about the belongings. When we're talking about the Songdo as an unsuccessful case in South Korea, when you go there, you cannot find anything. It's full of technologies, full of sensors, full of high-tech driven data gatherings, surveillance, and so on and so forth. But they're not successful because they never think about the context. Who are going to use these places, these cities? We need to answer this question. If we just say that we will have one template for every city, of course it will be a failure. We cannot do this. We need to think about context, and then based on the needs which are there, we need to design. We need to see the climate conditions. We need to see the social bonds. We need to see the infrastructure. We need to see the political governance. We need to see every aspect and then give it design. It's not going to be a single design or single plan for every city. Of course not.
It's also very interesting that you describe context as basically people, because for me, context is more of a physical background, and maybe the people, the personal element or the human element is also included, but you highlighted more as the human element. From your answer, I get that the context is the human background. Do I understand it correctly?
Yeah, when we're talking about context, of course, when you're talking about cities in general, the cities, who are the users? The people, those who are living in the cities. So when we're talking about the context, of course, we have physical and then we have social. So we need to find a relation with them. We cannot ignore people. Of course, we cannot ignore the physical aspects. So when we're talking about the context, it's important to consider the people, the social bonds, the gatherings. When you're talking about public spaces, about parks, plazas, where gatherings are present, we can see them, we can sense them. In Barcelona, we can see too many contacts, even intentional contacts, not your friends. You just walk around, you could see somebody, a stranger, and there is a space with which push you to talk about something or drink something. It is something that should happen in cities if you want to have livable, vibrant environments. If not, then we just focus on the physical aspects, which is my expertise, to design spaces with high-tech technologies, sensors, but it doesn't work when we don't see the people, the human dignity.
And then that comes next. You mentioned a few planned cities, Masdar and Songdo, and I would be curious whether you think that we can plan or design cities.
Of course, we are planners, we are city planners. There are too many people working on this field to create new spaces to design, but designed from scratch, a new smart city. If I want to give you 3 different types of cities, especially from my background, my main expertise, which are in smart cities, in AI, we have 3 types of smart cities. A smart city from scratch, reinforced smart cities, and social smart cities. These are 3 types of smart cities that you've been dealing with them. The first one, which is from scratch. Most of those we designed, we planned everything. We thought that we could attract people to settle, to study, to live, but they weren't so successful. We designed for them. And then we moved to the reinforcing the cities, the current cities like Barcelona, Singapore, New York, London, Paris, and so on and so forth. The current cities, we tried to reinforce them to be smart, not designing from scratch. And we have social smart cities, which concentrate and focus on citizens. Let's talk about, for example, a smart citizen. When we design about cities, we cannot say that we shouldn't design. Historically, we design for cities. from Rome, in Persia, and everywhere. We design for new cities. The thing that is important for everybody, for every planner, for every designer, is to see the needs. It's not enough to say, I'm going to design a city full of sensors like NEOM in Saudi Arabia, which now they're working. I have some critics about it. It doesn't work. When you're designing a city, you need to consider everything from social aspects, environmental, technological, financial, governance, so on and so forth. We have to design. We cannot let the cities grow like in medieval cities, which they were mostly organic cities without any predefined or pre-designed cities. We didn't give anything. So the cities, everybody built something, and then it was completely organic in Barcelona, in El Raval, or historical parts of European countries. The question is now here. We need to design with all complexity we have. We cannot let the cities grow without any design, without any plan. It's completely rejected. We have to design, we have to intervene, and we have to follow up a framework for cities, but based on the needs, real needs, and the people who are living there going to use it.
I would love to hear what are the three biggest fears or concerns regarding the future of cities for you.
For the fears, the future of cities is often painted, in terms of opportunity, innovation, and growth. Yet beneath hopeful narratives lie deeper anxieties, questions that challenge not only urban design or urban planning, but also the very foundation of how humanity lives together. It's important. For me, greatest fears about the future of cities are intertwined. Deepening of inequality, the risk of ecological overshoots, and the erosion of civic trust. Each of these concerns is rooted in existing patterns, visible in every cities across the globe. You can see them everywhere. And each will specify whether cities become sites of flourishing or landscape of fracture in the century ahead. The first one, which is about the inequality. Many cities now, and of course in the future, often considered and celebrated as engines of opportunity. They bring people together in dense networks that foster creativity, productivity, and cultural exchange. But they are also places where exclusion, segregation, and displacement become painfully visible. My first and perhaps greatest fear is that cities of the future will amplify inequality rather than reduce it. It's really important. I'm working now in high-tech companies myself, designing technologies, AI, sensors. But to be honest, we are amplifying the inequality rather to reduce it. Historically also, cities have always contained divisions. In ancient Rome, had opulent villas alongside crowded insulae, multi-storied chambers, or packed with the poor. Even in history, we can see this inequality, and the future will, I think, be amplified. The inequality in cities is expressed in multiple ways. In access to housing, education, healthcare, mobility, safety. The rise of superstar cities like London, San Francisco, and Hong Kong has created extraordinary wealth, yet also extraordinary barriers to entry. Housing markets inflate beyond the reach of ordinary workers, forcing many into long commuters or risky living conditions. There are too many examples, and I'm not going to talk about them in detail. However, without the intentional design and governance, the future of cities may see inequality deeper further. Automation, digital economies risk replacing jobs without providing adequate safety nets. If cities become playgrounds, let's say playgrounds for elites, gated communities, they risk fracturing the very social fabric that makes them flourish. So it's not just about uneven income. I'm not just talking about uneven income. It's about who feels they belong in the city and then who feels excluded. My fear is that future cities may normalize exclusion, embedding privilege and as lasting features of urban life. And the second one is about the ecological overshoot. And the third one is about the erosion of civic trust. I'm going to talk more about the civic trust. We all know about the ecological overshoot. I'm not going to talk more about it. The fear, which is about the civic trust, is less visible, but equally harsh. The erosion of civic trust. Cities function not only through infrastructure, but through relationships between residents, institutions, and leaders. Trust is the invisible glue that allows diverse people to live together, share resourcing, and endure cities. It's about the trust. Without it, cities break into suspicion, polarization, and conflict. Today, with the rise of technology, make these concerns sharper as cities adopt surveillance systems, digital platforms, and automated governance. The question becomes, do these tools empower citizens or isolate them? My fear is that if technology becomes an alternate for trust, rather than support, cities will slide into isolation. People may feel watched but not represented, connected digitally but isolated socially. In such a context, civic participation shrinks, polarization grows, and resilience erodes. So, without trust, even the best design infrastructure cannot hold the city together. And we need to see them all together as interconnected. These three fears, for myself at least, are not isolated. They feed into one another. Inequality makes ecological adoption harder. Defenseless population are hit by floods, heat waves, and pollution. Ecological stresses, in turn, can erode trust as organizations struggle to respond effectively. And a lack of trust makes it harder to address inequality, as polarization undermines collective action. The challenge for the future of cities, so, is therefore not only to address these fears individually, but to understand them as an interconnected system. It is important to consider.
I would like to go back to your first fear because I understand the need for places to be inclusive. And I also understand the need for places to save their character. And these two can be at odds very easily because there are traditional communities which can be very closed off to outsiders. There are cultures which can be very closed off to outsiders, but they have a character at that specific space. So I'm curious, how would you balance out inequality and character of place?
When we're talking about actually the inclusion with distinctiveness in cities, on the one hand, cities must be inclusive. Everyone should have access to housing, services, jobs, and public life. And on the other hand, each neighborhood or district area has its own character. It's obvious. Its own identity, culture, which we do not want to erase in the name of uniformity. It is important to consider. The challenge in my mind is how to reduce inequality without flattening difference. How designers, urban planners often approach it. Every resident, regardless of background, should have access to safe housing, for example, education, healthcare, mobility, and public space. This doesn't mean at all that every place looks the same. It means every place offers dignity. It's important. We need to celebrate local character. Inclusion doesn't mean to myself homogenization. It's important to consider. Cities can preserve cultural districts, architectural styles, and community traditions while ensuring they're not exclusionary. In Havana, for example, retained a strong Cuban identity, but is also accessible to broader communities. It's not just for the people from Cuba. Prevent displacement is another thing that I am thinking about it. When we're talking about gentrification, often erodes character by pushing out the long-term residents. Tools like rent stabilization, community land trust, and mixed income housing can maintain diversity and ensure locals benefit from investment rather than being displaced by. Inclusive cities emphasize public spaces where diverse groups encounter one another, like parks, plazas, libraries, transport hubs, and so on and so forth. So we need to make a balance, global and local. Global capital and migration shape cities. But inclusive governance ensures benefits are not captured by elites alone. So this balance means welcoming investments while protecting local heritage and affordability. The balance is struck by ensuring quality of opportunity and access, while preserving distinctive social, cultural fabric of places, context, architectural style, everything you say. The key is not to erase inequality by erasing differences, but to transform equality into diversity with dignity.
I also loved your expression that it's more about access to opportunities, access to basic opportunities than providing the same outcome, which could be a really good opportunity for the future of cities. So what are the three biggest opportunities regarding the future of cities for you?
If fear reveals the fractures of urban life, opportunities reveal this potential. The future of cities will not be defined only by risks, but by moments where imagination, governance, and practice converge to create new possibilities. So to me are again intertwined: the opportunity for experimentation, the chance to rethink infrastructure, and the reimagination of public space. Each of these represent a field where choices made now can ripple outward for generations. The first opportunity, I would say, is about cities as laboratories of experimentation. Cities have always been places of trial and error. Their density, their diversity, and urgency create conditions of experimentation unmatched by rural or national context. Next to technology, to culture, cities are samples or places which can be tested, scaled, and discarded, often faster than in the other political system. Historically, when we see cities, they have been pots of innovation. In Florence, pilot banking practices, or in Manchester, for factories which pioneered industrialization, this experimental spirit is re-emerging in governance. Cities are at the forefront of climate diplomacy, with networks like C4T enabling mayors to test and share policy. So when we're talking about participatory budgeting, first pioneered in Brazil, has spread globally as an experiment in deep democracy. Even responses to crises such as New York City's pandemic-era outdoor dining program showed us how temporarily trials can transform into long-term policies. The opportunity here is not just technological, but cultural. Cities can normalize experimentations. They can become places where failure is understood as part of learning and where small trials ripple outward to reshape whole system. In the second one, I would talk about rethinking infrastructure. Infrastructure is the skeleton of a city, the visible system that shape daily life: roads, grids, pipes, cables, everything. These are the physical networks. But infrastructure is also social and cultural. Housing, schools, and institutions. The coming decades, the future, offer an essential opportunity to rethink both forms of infrastructure in ways that decarbonize, inclusive, and adaptive. If in 20th century, infrastructure was often designed for efficiency and growth, freeways cut through neighborhood housing blocks that warehouse, this system powered economic systems expansion, but also created ecological damage and social fragmentation. The 21st century offers a chance to rebuild different. Energy infrastructure can be decarbonized. Cities from Los Angeles to Nairobi are investing in distributed solar, microgrid, and energy storage. The opportunity is not only environmental but social. Energy democracy can reduce cost and increase resilience. I'm not going to talk more about this, as shown that the digital identity can streamline these services, but the opportunity lies in ensuring that digital systems serve inclusion rather than surveillance. The challenge is to treat data as a public good, not merely as corporate property. The opportunity of rethinking infrastructure is profound because infrastructure endures. Building to grid systems built today will shape generation. So the third one I want to talk about is creativity and the health. Public space is where the life of the city becomes visible. Parks, plazas, sidewalks, and streets. Reimagining these spaces is an opportunity to support belonging, diversity, and collective life. The design of public space also intersects with social justice, whose histories are building new plazas, but also reshaping norms of access, safety, and, for example, inclusion. When we're talking about the public space, we're talking about those places where strangers become neighbors. In an era of loneliness and polarization, it is perhaps the most urgent site for democratic life. And so these three opportunities are not separated silos. It's important to consider. Experimentation creates the culture that allows infrastructure to be rethought. Infrastructure creates the backbone that makes public space possible. And public space, in turn, supports the civic imagination need for further experimentation. Together, they form a worthy cycle of urban opportunity that I wanted to talk about them. So the future of city will be shaped by our fears and our opportunities. So we need to consider all of them together.
Arman, thank you so much for your time today. What is your role in establishing the future of cities?
If I want to talk about not just my role, every planner, every designer, and everyone who is involved in this process, we need to think more clearly about different system and technology in the city. In my opinion, if I want to say, every person in their own way has a role of a place. So for me, that the role is twofold, to analysis and to convene. I see myself both a thinker and bridge builder, let's say like this, working to make sense of how cities evolve while also bridging people together to imagine and enact alternatives. So as an academic, my first responsibility is analysis. This is my role. Cities are complex organisms shaped not just by physical form, but by hidden systems and power dynamics. So to understand them, we need to require going beyond surface appearances, beyond the skylines, actually to the underlying forces that drive urban change. But analysis alone is not enough. Knowledge can sit on a shelf, and if it is not shared, debated, and translated into practice, that is why I seek convening as the second part of my role, every planner role actually. Convening means bringing together actors who might not otherwise meet. It means organizing dialogue where a mayor listens to a street vendor, or when an architect debates with an environmental activist, or a tech provider collaborates with a social worker. It's about breaking silos, fostering empathy, and creating the conditions for co-creation. When such spaces are designed well, they do more than exchange ideas. They build relationships, trust, and collective ownership. My role is to facilitate these encounters, ensuring that knowledge flows across different disciplines and that decisions are informed actually by diverse perspectives. So if I were to sum up my role, I would say I'm both a witness and a viewer. A witness because analysis requires documenting not just what is visible, but also what is hidden, naming injustices as well as opportunities, and a viewer because convening requires a stitching together threads from different sectors and communities, creating a fabric that's strong enough to hold diverse aspiration.
Thank you very much, Arman. And please keep up this good work because we do need this kind of bridging between the different silos. Do you have any closing comments or requests for the audience?
As we conclude, I want to leave just with two reflections. The future of cities is not predetermined. It will not simply arrive. It is made through the choices and actions of everyone who lives in, works in, governs in urban spaces. So every decision, from the routes we take, to the schools we support, to the businesses we patronize, has ripple effects. So cities like Copenhagen and Vienna show it's intentional or different actions can achieve to reach to livable streets, stable neighborhoods, and inclusive infrastructure. And conversely, neglect or uneven policy is seen in some fast-growing cities produce congestion, inequality, and informal settlement. Every resident participates in shaping their city, whether willfully or not. Civic engagement, advocacy, volunteering, and attention to our surrounding, all of them matters. And second, promoting an ethic of care is essential. The cities are more than infrastructure. Lived experiences shaped by relationships, belongings, and memory. So care can be systematic, like Singapore's green planning or Porto Alegre's budgeting. The future of cities is open-ended because it depends on our choices, and profoundly human because those choices are ethical, relational, and imaginative. So if we step into this responsibility with awareness and care, the city we dream of is the city we will make together. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope our conversation inspires listeners to see themselves as active participants in shaping the cities of tomorrow and to bring care, interest, and imagination into places they call home.
Thank you so much, Arman.
Thank you.
It was really interesting to hear from Arman about his understanding of the future depends on us. It will fall to our imagination, not to our fears. Not to mention his description on smart cities. Yours truly, Fanny Mellers, talked about the potential evolution of smart cities into smart approaches in episode 156. You can find out more about Arman online. All the links are in the show notes. What was the most interesting part for you? What questions did arise regarding Arman's approach to the future of cities? What have you learned from this interview? Let me know on Twitter at WTF4Cities or on the WTF4Cities.com website where the transcripts and show notes are available. You can also subscribe on the website not to miss any new episodes and leave some feedback. I hope this was an interesting interview for you as well, and thanks for tuning in.
What is the Future for Cities podcast?